I can't even believe how long this week was. And wow, it is already the 11th of June. Can you guys believe that? It's pretty crazy. Um, Anyway, today I wanted to come talk to you guys a little bit about a couple of things that have been going on in the office, questions that I've gotten, and do some broker bits, really to kind of clue everyone in on some or answer some questions that we've had, and also try to um, show you guys a little bit within some of the financing contingencies about appraisals and about some of the verbiage with appraisals. So I'm gonna see if I can actually figure out how to do this today. So kind of excited on being able to figure out if I can share my screen with you guys. So I hope this is actually going to work. So we'll see how this works. But anyway, first I want to throw a couple things out there that I've had a couple of questions with very recently, like within the last week. Quite a few questions on this. So first and foremost, a lot of agents have been coming asking questions about dual agency. All right. So first and foremost, guys, to let you know, our office does not participate in dual agency. All right, so what is dual agency? Think way back in your real estate classes. Dual agency is when you actually are representing you're representing the buyer and the seller as a client. All right, you have a buyer brokerage agreement signed and you have a listing agreement signed. Okay, we don't do that. All right, why? Because you truthfully cannot, in all good reasoning, represent both equally. Now, we all have really great thought processes saying, oh yeah, we totally can. We can do that, but you really can't, guys. I mean, let's be honest. So it's really difficult to be able to honestly take care of your seller, protect your seller's interest, and then turn around on the flip side and take care of your buyer and protect your buyer's interest. So we do not participate in dual agency. However, we do allow you to represent both the buyer and seller in a transaction. Here's how we do that. Number one, we always choose to represent the seller. So at Coldwell Banker, when you are in a listing agreement, we as the brokerage are representing the seller. So that is our first responsibility, okay? So you represent the seller as a client. And then the customer that the buyer that comes up, you will be representing them as a customer. You are not engaging with them in a buyer brokerage agreement. You ask them to sign a customer acknowledgement form, and you can still do all the menial tasks that you normally would for a buyer. You can help set up an inspection. You can get all their documents over to the attorney's office. You can actually even pull comps for them. What you can't do, you number one, cannot negotiate on their behalf. So you can't sit there and help them decide how they need to structure an offer. You can't sit there and tell them how they need to or what they need to ask for in negotiations to a seller, and you can't render an opinion of value. So let's talk about that. What actually is rendering an opinion of value? That means that in looking at the comps, crunching the numbers, pulling up the dollar per square foot and everything that goes on, you can't say, well, in looking at this, it's my professional opinion that we need to offer this. You can't do that. Now, you can pull all this amazing information out, lay it in front of them, give them some great websites and say, all right, Mr. Customer, Mr. Buyer, Miss Buyer, what would you like me to offer? Right? Because you can absolutely do that and really just be a paper pusher in that standpoint and say, okay, what do you want to offer? Do you want to ask for closing cost? When would you like the closing date to be? Is there an attorney's office you'd like to use? Yes, you can absolutely do that. So if you get in those situations, please give me a call. Let me know, because I absolutely don't want you to walk away from having the opportunity to get both sides of the deal because you're confused on dual agency versus customer and client relationships. Second thing is when you're filling out your buyer brokerage agreement and people ask you, we don't do dual agency, but we also don't do sub-agency. Sub-agency is a form of agency that people used to use quite a bit in Georgia before we had buyer brokerage agreement. You would actually become a sub-agent of the listing agent so that you could then bring a buyer to the brokerage so that you could get paid. We don't really do that anymore. Because we represent buyers, we don't need to do that. You can actually have a customer relationship there again, or a client relationship. So we don't have to exercise sub-agency. So we do not perform that in the office as well. So any questions on those two, definitely, please let me know. All right, I hope that clears it up a little bit. Now let me see if for some reason I can find where I now can share with you my screen, because I was super excited to be able to start screen sharing. And now it's saying that I can't do it, which is making me really sad. So, all right, so we'll have to talk about it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about appraisal contingencies. So I'm going to pull up my iPad here so that we can read some word for word verbiage. I was hoping to actually be able to tell you what it said, but I guess that it's just going to be kind of crazy and not let me do that. So I do apologize about that, guys, because I really wanted to be able to show you on the screen what it actually said, but I'll kind of try to walk it through as best I possibly can. All right, so let's talk about the conventional loan first. This situation came up this week, so I want to first shout out to awesome Alan, who he and I got to learn something together this week. He had the seller got in a conventional loan and got the appraisal back. The appraisal was less than what the purchase price was, and they sent an amendment to reduce the sales price, and the seller said no. The seller had a backup offer, did not have to in any way, form, or fashion accept it. That's the seller's choice. And they went back to the buyer and said, no, the seller's not going to take it, and then didn't hear anything. The buyer went quiet. Went and told the listing agent that they were not going to take it, and then the listing agent came back to Alan and said, you need to write the termination. And Alan came to me and said, I don't write the termination, right? So we actually pulled up the conventional loan exhibit and read the second paragraph of the conventional loan exhibit. So for you guys who, and I'm going to see, I know it's very hard for you guys to actually read it because it's backwards on here. So I'm going to let you see and try to make it small enough so that you guys can see. All right, so here's the actual exhibit. All right, so there's the appraisal contingency. There's the second paragraph. Here's actually what it says. It says that the seller, I'll turn it this way so I can read the whole thing at one time. The seller shall, not later than 3 days from the date of the amendment to reduce the sales price, is delivered to the seller, but not later than 2 days prior to closing, accept or reject the amendment to reduce the sales price, to negotiate with the buyer a lesser reduction of the sales price of the property than that is reflected in the amendment to reduce the sales price. Which means if the purchase price was $300 and the amendment came back, or the appraisal came back and said it was $275, okay? They submit the amendment, the seller says no. They have 3 days to negotiate within the time period from the time the seller says no. They have 3 days from the time the seller says no to renegotiate another price and agree upon that. Now, that time period cannot be within 2 days of closing, okay? Because we know appraisals take a little bit of time. Cannot be within 2 days of closing, but 3 days after the seller says no to negotiate a lesser price than what the seller said no to, okay? So now, if within the time frame the amendment to reduce the sales price has not been signed or accepted by the buyer and seller, and a timely delivery has not created a legally enforceable amendment, so nothing new has been signed, the buyer shall have an additional 3 days, but not later than 1 day prior to closing, to terminate the agreement without penalty. Okay, do you guys understand that? So the buyer does have those 3 days. The buyer has those 3 days to terminate. Now, the seller does not have that to terminate, but why would he? Because at this point, the seller is going to get full price if the buyer doesn't terminate. So the appraisal may have come in at $275, but you're still in a contract for $300, right? So this is saying that the buyer has those additional 3 days, but there again, not later than 1 day prior to closing, to terminate this agreement without penalty. If the buyer does not terminate the agreement within the time frame, the buyer's right to terminate due to the failure to agree to an amendment to reduce the sales price shall be waived, and the buyer shall close on the property for the purchase price set forth in this agreement. Nothing herein shall require the buyer to seek a reduction in the sales price. Says it right there. All right. So that takes care of question number 1 that has come up as far as what's happening with, what's been happening when it comes down to appraisals, like, appraisal contingencies, and what happens once you get that appraisal back. Now, another question that I had come up just yesterday was on a VA. Now, you guys are going to hear me say, and I will say up one side and down the other. Guys, I absolutely 100% love VA loans. All right. There is no reason whatsoever that you as an agent do not educate yourself on a VA loan, on the buyer side and on the seller side. Guys, do you understand that VAs don't give pre-qualifications? You're either approved as a veteran or you're not approved as a veteran. Talk to Jeff, guys. Find out the details about this. VA loans are fantastic. Once they approve a veteran, they don't take that back. When they get approved for a loan, come hell or high water, they're going to the closing table. Okay? As long as everything checks out with the house, they're getting the money. That's the amazing thing about being able to qualify for a VA loan. The VA does a lot of things crazy. And being the child of a veteran, I understand this. Not everything is great, but they will bend over backwards to try to make sure the veteran gets money to get a house. Okay, so now I want to talk to you about the VA financing contingency because it's very different from all the other financing contingencies. All right, you will see in the they don't have an appraisal contingency. In it, number 11 is called an amendatory clause. You will notice there are no dates. It's awesome. So I'm going to read it to you because here again, I want you to understand what it says. It says, it is expressed that, notwithstanding any other provisions in this agreement, which means, guys, there are no other stipulations, nothing else has been put into this purchase and sale agreement that would supersede this amendatory clause. So nothing else, no other provisions in this agreement. The buyer shall not incur any penalties by forfeiture of any earnest money deposits or otherwise be obligated to complete the purchase of this property described herein if the agreement purchase price or cost exceeds the reasonable value of the property established by the Veterans Administration. That is the first sentence of the whole line, which means what? Purchase price is $300. It comes in at $275. If it comes in at $275 the day before closing, the veteran can walk with no penalties, get all earnest monies back, and walk away. That's their right. Right here it says it. You don't need an appraisal contingency. You don't need to stipulate how many days because it doesn't matter. Per this amendatory clause, they're protected. So I want you guys to understand that. This is huge. This is huge for the veteran. This is fantastic from a protection standpoint for the buyer, okay? But here's the awesome thing about this one too. Second sentence says, the buyer shall, however, have the privilege and the option to proceed with the consummation of this agreement without regard to the amount established by the VA. So if it is appraised for less, they can still purchase it. The VA doesn't care. They're going to give them the amount of money it appraised for. The buyer shall pay in the excess amount in cash from a source which the buyer agrees to disclose to the VA and which the buyer represents will not be borrowed from funds accepted from those approved from the VA. Sorry, you can't have some random drug money, but if you have the money and you've already shown the VA that you have the funds, you can absolutely pay the difference in cash. Not a problem. The VA doesn't care. If you want to buy a $500,000 house and it appraises for $275,000, you can pay the difference in cash. They don't care, but they're going to lend you the money of what it appraises for. If the VA reasonable value of the property is less than the purchase price, the seller may reduce the purchase price if they choose to the amount equal to the VA reasonable value, and all parties to the sale shall close at such lower purchase price with appropriate adjustments to the sales agreement. Right there. The veteran, the buyer, has that right to make that decision. It's pretty awesome, but you need to understand that. Okay? So, I mean, that's great, guys. That should be a huge weight lifted off all of your shoulders when you are looking as a buyer or as representing a buyer to understand the amendatory clause, or in most cases an appraisal contingency, and how you move through that. All right, so let's talk about the one that most of us fear the most, which is the FHA. All right, here again, guys, if you look in FHA is number 11 as well. It says amendatory clause 2. All right, it doesn't say appraisal contingency because it's an amendatory clause. There are no days in an FHA amendatory clause. However, in an FHA amendatory clause, you have to put a dollar figure. That's right. So if you attach it to a purchase and sale agreement, and then that purchase and sale agreement, the price changes, whether you have an escalation clause and it goes up, or you renegotiate and it goes down, and you don't change the FHA exhibit and amendatory clause, you're stuck with that purchase price that you put in that blank. See that blank right there? Right over there. Yeah. So guys, let's read it and kind of see the differences, okay? So the amendatory clause states, it is expressed that notwithstanding any other provision in this agreement, so there, let's take a step back. If you use the stipulations that were given to us by Weissman, that's going to supersede this. So make sure you pay attention and you understand the different agreements that you have, and you're making sure that you're still protecting your buyer. Any questions you guys have on this, we can call Caitlin. We can call a Weissman attorney. We can call any attorney. We can sit down and have that conversation, but I want you guys to feel 100% confident that you're having these conversations with your buyer. But let's read it. All right. Notwithstanding any other provisions, buyers shall not be obligated to complete the purchase of the property herein or occur any penalty by forfeiture of earnest money deposits or otherwise unless the buyer has given, in accordance with HUD and FHA requirements, a written statement by the Federal Housing Commissioner or direct endorsement lender setting forth the appraised value of the property of not less than blank. That's where you put in the purchase price. Buyers shall have the privilege and option of proceeding with the consummation of the contract without regards to the amount of the appraisal valuation. The appraised value is arrived at to be determined the maximum mortgage the Department of Housing and Urban Development will insure. HUD does not warrant the value or condition of the property. The purchaser should satisfy himself with the price and condition of the property that they are acceptable. So guys, this is a little different from the VA. Yes, they have up until closing to be able to have the appraisal back and the appraised price back. However, a little bit different here. You actually have a price and evaluation that you can put in. They can, under certain circumstances, pay over that price. You just want to make sure that you have that conversation with the lender and you understand what those stipulations are with FHA because they can be different, if that makes sense. So you want to make sure that with some of those, you do have that conversation with the lender, because you don't want to, you don't want your buyer to think that they can pay additional and then it mess up the loan to ratio values, some of the different things that are going on with the FHA loan, because there are some very specific stipulations that go along with FHA, which is why they qualify for FHA. So make sure you have that conversation with the lender. Obviously, as we all know, so let's all make sure that we quote it, we are not lenders, so we can't give lending advice. We are not attorneys, so we are not giving legal advice. We are not dentists. You don't want us working on your teeth. We are real estate professionals, so what we are trying to do is to help them understand what our real estate contracts say and what they're getting into, and to help them make some of the best decisions. So guys, I hope this helps you a little bit today. I know that there has still been some crazy stuff going on out there and some crazy questions, but you know what? We can get through this together. We have so many amazing partners here, so many great people who have already experienced all this, gone through it, dug through some of that muck and been through the trenches. Let them help you. Let us help you. Let our awesome strategic partners help you. And not to mention, you know, I know it can be a little challenging out there, but we're going to get through this. Just to let you guys know, NAR is saying, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, is saying that we know we're going to see a very strong market now for at least the next 18 months. We're not saying that it's going to be quite as crazy as it has been, but it is still going to be a very strong market. So we need to make sure that we have our toolkit prepared and some great things in our arsenal to be able to take to customers and clients. So we're going to see that it's going to be pretty powerful out there for sellers. So we need to make sure that we are pushing for that just one more. Of course, we know what that is, guys. That is listings. We need to be focusing on listings. So for those of you on Facebook Live today, you're going to be getting some messages from me, because we are going to be gearing up for our second half of the year, really pushing for that just one more. We have done amazing so far with listings, and there are several of you out there who need to push for that just one more. So I'm going to be sending out a list for that, because it's going to be about the listing game moving forward for here on out, to be truly honest with you. So I want to make sure that we are preparing you to be able to leverage yourself and your business to be ready for the next 6 months. So guys, I hope this has helped you. If you need anything, definitely reach out. Let me know. Super excited to see what we can accomplish. And I hope you guys have a fabulous Friday.